Welcome to another episode of Full Build Friday, where I try to build a character from a comic, game, or similar source using the baseline rules of Pathfinder Second Edition and the Path Builder app. We explored the new playtest class, the Commander, last week, so as promised, this time around, we're taking a look at the Guardian. And while some people seem pretty happy with the Commander, the reception on the Guardian has been a little less positive. But that is why it's a playtest. Regardless, I'm going to build to bring out the best of the ballistic beastie, Rammus, the Armordillo.
Okay.
We're back to exploring the legends of the League with this build, which means we need to map out some goals before we get started. Rammus is a mystery within the lore of League, theorized by some to be an ascendant who wanders the deserts of Shurima, where he is viewed as a hero for showing up and saving people from seemingly certain disaster. He does this by serving as a vanguard, an offensive type of tank that leads the charge for his party. Passively, Spike Shell adds damage to his attacks based on his armor. He can activate Powerball to roll up and then speed up. Once he collides with an enemy, he stops rolling while damaging and knocking them back. He enters a protective stance with his defensive ball curl that increases his armor and magic resistance, while also causing the attacks his enemies make against him to damage them as well. To encourage these attacks, Rammus can use Frenzying Taunt to force nearby enemies to attack him while also increasing his own attack speed. He rounds out his abilities with Soaring Slam. With this, he leaps to a target location, dealing damage and slowing enemies in the area. This area is then plagued by aftershocks for several seconds afterwards that further damage and slow enemies. This all comes together into a durable roly-poly, able to turn his defense to offense, keep the enemies focused on him, to their own considerable regret, and then knock them around once he's done with them. A key facet will be his ability to hurt people for attacking him, as well as the way that he can dynamically enter fights, as seen with both Powerball and Soaring Slam. With that covered, let's get into the build for this valiant vanguard so he can vanquish some vile villains. In a first for the full build series, we'll use the Shisk ancestry with the Quillcoat heritage, solely to take advantage of its barbed quill's reaction. This is very obviously used to represent his defensive ball curl, but is regrettably limited to a single use per day, which means that we are going to be on the lookout for other ways to replicate its effects. Since we regularly see Rammus going unarmed, sometimes just headbutting towers, he'll take Spine Stabber as his ancestry feat, granting him a nifty little attack to shank people with, as one is wont to do, of course. With the mystery surrounding the story of Rammus, the tall tale background feels like a solid fit to represent that, even if he doesn't use the training and performance, or the impressive performance skill feat that this background provides. We're just going to roll with it and right into the next one. As promised, Rammus will use the Guardian class, which provides him with a few handy tools. This class comes with Taunt, an ability of hotly debated usefulness, that nevertheless serves to represent Frenzying Taunt in spirit if nothing else. The Guardian also has Intercept Strike, which does let Rammus tank and force attacks to hit him, but is a bit more protective than Rammus usually is. Additionally, the Guardian has a Threat Technique, which I guess is a sort of subclass? It's super minor, and I think Ferocious Vengeance is easily the better of the two options, with the other one only providing resistance against crits, which feels very limited. Along with these ingrained options, Rammus gets a class feat, which is used to take Unkind Shove. This adds damage to Rammus' shoves, incentivizing the use of the maneuver and referencing the knockback on his Powerball. For his skills, Rammus will be trained in Acrobatics, Athletics, Diplomacy, Nature, and Survival. And then we look at the ability scores of this astoundingly armored animal. I do personally think it's weird that the Guardian, as a dedicated tank, doesn't have Constitution as a key ability score, or at least have 12 class hit points. Since it doesn't, Rammus is going to prioritize Strength, which is admittedly important with the lagging attack bonus that these Guardians have. Constitution will be a secondary focus because the entire point of Intercept Strike is to take the damage for your allies, and he therefore needs that extra HP. I promised that I would avoid using archetypes for these playtest builds, so we delve deeper into this dedicated defender to dig up Armor Break. This is, to be entirely honest, not a great feat. You break your armor, to deal additional damage on a single strike. It does kinda suck. However, it works to represent the extra damage that Rammus gains from his Spike Shell passive, and we will therefore be taking it. His skill feat is a bit more functional, with Quick Jump letting him leap into the fight faster, partially akin to a Soaring Slam. In a bizarre choice that will become clear later, Rammus gains adopted ancestry at 3rd level, and will turn out to have been adopted and raised by a bunch of rat folk, or Ysoki. In addition to this, the Tough to Kill class feature gives Rammus the Die Hard general feat, something important for a character that is meant to take damage for his teammates. Rammus doesn't display a lot of skills, but does jump around a bit, which leads to an increase to athletics, making him an expert in it. Based off of that skill increase, Rammus uses Flying Tackle as his class feat for his 4th level feat, ironically taking away to represent his ultimate rather early on. This Flying Tackle doesn't deal damage, but knocking people prone is a great way to represent the slowing effects of his Soaring Slam. This action does necessitate a leap, so naturally he takes Powerful Leap as his skill feat to extend the range of it, letting him launch himself even deeper into combat. Unlike most martials at 5th level, the Guardian increases their armor proficiency rather than their weapons, though they specifically only increase their medium and heavy armor. I normally don't mention things like this, but I think it's important because it is a little reversed for the Guardian. Their armor will further increase at 11th level and then become a legend in their armor at 15th level. On the other hand, they don't become an expert with their weapons until 7th level, and they aren't a master until 17th level, which is kind of nuts. Also at this level is an ancestry feat, which will be spent on renewing quills. This changes his barbed quills reaction from daily to a use every 10 minutes. This still means that he's only getting to use it once per fight, but at least he has the option to do so now. Then for his skill increase, he becomes an expert in survival, given his habitation of a harsh, hot desert. While Flying Tackle represents the initial launch of Soaring Slam, it is through Stomp Ground at 6th level that we represent the impact and following aftershocks, though the damage only comes in when a creature critically fails their save. Nevertheless, a quick jump into the center of enemies, followed by Stomp Ground, feels like a great way to represent his ultimate. With the focus on athletic maneuvers in the class feats we've already taken, Rammus takes Titan Wrestler to fight against the vast monsters of Runeterra, such as the mighties of the Xur that inhabit the sands he rolls across. I wanted to take that adopted ancestry early to get it out of the way, so Rammus takes Toughness at 7th level to be able to survive the multitude of hits that he will surely be taking. We'll also be increasing athletics again to become master in this, enhancing his leaps, jumps, and maneuvers. For 8th level, Rammus takes Group Taunt, allowing him to use Taunt against 3 creatures at once, since his Frenzying Taunt does indeed affect multiple creatures within League. For a stranger choice, he takes Catfall as his skill feat. It does help out if his leaps and bounds go awry, and is generally useful, but it is an investment. There's another feat that builds out of this that I do think kind of fits the character, but we'll get to that in a bit. Speaking of other investments, I may very well have taken Adopted Ancestry too early, because even at level 9, we're taking Bristle from the Shisk Ancestry. This functions similar to the Raise a Shield action, but instead has Rammus curl up into a ball to increase his armor class, and also has the added benefit of resembling the increase provided by his defensive ball curl. To make our desert dweller's daily life a little bit easier in his home, he becomes a master in survival with this level's skill increase. Rammus's taunt in League not only affects multiple creatures, but also locks them down, unlike the taunt in Pathfinder. To replicate that particular aspect, we are taking Hampering Sweeps at 10th level, which might be one of the best feats available to the Guardian. The lockdown this provides is huge, and can force melee-only enemies to have no options but to hit Rammus, and in turn, let him trigger his barbed quills. He then takes Terrain Expertise for the desert as a skill feat, providing him with a small boost to survival checks made in his preferred environment. By 11th level, Rammus takes Fast Recovery. He's already got Toughness and Die Hard, the other two classical, tanky general feats, and this just rounds out that trio. With his athletics and survival both at master at this point, it is now time to start increasing acrobatics, making him an expert in it. Now all this time we've still really only had one way to hurt people that hurt us, but at 12th level we can finally expand our options with Armored Counterattack. For some reason this is another limited ability that can only be used once per minute and isn't even guaranteed damage. It requires the Guardian to gamble on a strike. It is still certainly a useful ability, I just wonder if it couldn't use a little more juice. Then, with the previous increase in acrobatics, Rammus can take rolling landing, since it's rolling. It's what he does. It is honestly the okayest option for this little dude. Speaking of rolling, the reason behind being adopted by Ratfolk finally becomes apparent at 13th level as we take Ratfolk Roll. This is admittedly limited in its usage, but it significantly speeds up Rammus and even causes him to deal damage to the first obstacle he hits, and himself, making this a near perfect fit for his Power Ball. I'm really not sure what other skills Rammus should have, so since we already started investing in acrobatics, I figured he might as well increase that to become a master in it. With the fact that Barbed Quills is a reaction, even if it's only once per 10 minutes, I would take Quick Intercept for Rammus at 14th level, giving him an extra intercept strike each round so that he could potentially use both of them in a round. We have that master acrobatics, so for our skill feat, Rammus will be taking Kip Up. It doesn't represent anything specific from his kit, but it is an extremely useful skill feat that I feel like if you can take, you always should. Being able to stand up as a free action is just too good of a thing to pass up on. Rammus has admittedly been running a little slow due to his armor, so taking Fleet as his general feat at 15th level helps him get back on par with his teammates while also enhancing his speed for his Ratfolk Roll. With achieving level 15, he can now increase his athletics to the legendary proficiency. While this is once more strike-based, Clang is a fantastic option to grant Rammus the chance to hit enemies that strike at him. It triggers once per turn and is a free action, but for all those benefits, it only triggers on a critical miss, which does at least have a decent chance of happening when he isn't at a penalty from taunting an enemy. To aid the range of his leaps into the fray, Rammus uses Cloud Jump as a skill feat. With Quick Jump, this means that he could potentially leap 75 feet as a single action, putting him in a position to unleash a Stomp Ground or lock down those enemies with hampering sweeps. From a lower level option, Rammus takes Quill Spray as his Ancestry feat at 17th level, giving him an area attack option after he's gathered all his enemies around him. The damage on this isn't bad. A lot of similar effects use d6 dice, whereas this uses a d8 die, and comes with a flat persistent bleed damage. His next skill increase will then make him a legend in survival, which will determine his final two skill feats. Within the game of League itself, Defensive Ball Curl increases Rammus's magic resistance in addition to his armor, which leads to the use of Intercept Energy at 18th level. It's kind of a shame that this isn't core to the Guardian, who can normally only intercept strike if the attack deals physical damage, but the other feats unfortunately took precedence over it. As for his skill feat, Legendary Survivalist means that he will no longer have to be worried about the severe heat or worse of his arid abode. Pick Up the Pace lets our rolling Rammus urge his companions onward, serving his role as a vanguard that leads the charge into the thick of it.
Into the thick of it?
We'll round out his skills with an increase to acrobatics, since that will make him a legend in the skill, letting him fall any distance without damage thanks to Catfall, and roll even further with rolling landing. The Guardian's balanced reprisals look nice at first glance, but Rammus honestly isn't that protective of a champion in-game. I'm instead going to play towards that a bit by taking Quick Vengeance with his final class feat. This feat still kinda sucks, as it only makes him quicken when certain conditions are met, unlike the similar capstone feats that make characters quickened, but simply limit how that extra action can be used. Nevertheless, this opportunity to gain the quicken condition is a great way to represent the enhanced attack speed of Frenzying Taunt, something I wasn't sure I was going to be able to replicate with this build. For similar reasoning as his Pick Up the Pace feat, Rammus takes Legendary Guide, letting him lead the people he saved to a safer location before he rolls off into the sands and sunset once more. However, before he gets over the horizon, we've got to take a look at his free archetype options. To be fully honest, Rammus is a fairly simple creature that we have quite competently covered, if I do say so myself. But if it's a free archetype game anyway, I take a look at the Stalwart Defender dedication, which helps to make Rammus even tankier, and comes with a solid range of options for him, such as Rupture Stomp, fitting the theme of his Soaring Slam's aftershocks, Cracked Mountain, letting him hang in the fight and strike out at an enemy, and Stone Body, giving him some juicy temporary resistances. With all that said, we've come to the end of our build for Rammus, so let's roll up and see what we've got. Rammus the Armordillo is a Quillcoat Shisk Guardian with the Ferocious Vengeance threat technique and the Tall Tale background to represent the myths and stories that surround him. His Spike Shell passive is admittedly difficult to represent, but Armor Break uses his armor to deal extra damage, leading into it. This does admittedly break his armor, but it feels as though it at least fits in spirit. While he can cover the knockback and damage of this Powerball early on through his Unkind Shove, it's only through an adopted ancestry and Ratfolk roll that he gets that curl and speed up of this ability. Bristle grants Rammus some increased defenses based off of his defensive ball curl, while the return damage comes from his barbed quills, clang, and armored counterattack. Each of these are somewhat limited in their use, which leads to the necessity of collecting all of them. Taunt is a standard class feature of the Guardian, and Rammus can expand it into his Frenzying Taunt through the grouped Taunt class feat, while the actual hard crowd control effect comes from hampering sweeps, preventing the enemy from moving past him. The attack speed it grants is a little harder to recreate, but Quick Vengeance makes him quickened after he uses Intercept Strike, which helps to capture that idea. He finalizes his lineup of abilities with Flying Tackle, mimicking the initial launch of Soaring Slam. For the Aftershock effect, he has to rely on Stomp Ground, though this lacks the damage component of this effect unless they critically fail their save. Finally, as an inhabitant of Shurima, Rammus takes terrain expertise for the desert, and also has legendary survivalists to take the heat, as well as pick up the pace and legendary guide to lead his teammates through peril and into the fray. Ably armed and awesomely armored, this affable Armordillo ably acquires the attention of adversaries, amazingly averting adverse assets for his allies. Next week, we're probably going to be looking at me making sheets again, because I got my Howl of the Wild PDF early, and next Friday is after its street date. Probably a little too early for Path Builder, but I've got some plans to show off the new content already in place. Until then, let me know what you think of this build and what other builds you might like to see in a comment below. To see more character sheets and level-by-level item choices, be sure to check out the build on the Monster Monday blog, or take a look at the Twitter, both of which are linked in the description. See you next week for a truly wild build, and have a fantastic Friday.
Keep rolling, 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 keep